What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Packers Preview. Wes Hodkowitz joined alongside my colleague Mike Spofford before this Sunday's Week 8 matchup between the Green Bay Packers and Jacksonville Jaguars down in Florida. Fox noon Central start time. Michael, the Green Bay Packers looking to improve to 6-2. The Jacksonville Jaguars looking to get on a win streak after their win in London last week against the New England Patriots. We will be taking your questions for the next 10 to 15 or so minutes on X, Facebook, and YouTube. You can submit those questions there. Our wonderful social media team will send those over to me in our Microsoft Surface. But before we get those questions, Mike, we did get the Packers injury report. 3 questionable players for the Packers. That includes Devontae Wyatt with the ankle injury, Quay Walker, who is still in the concussion protocol, as Matt LaFleur said in his post-practice news conference, and Josh Myers, who was limited on Thursday and Friday with the wrist injury. Doubtful is Corey Ballentine. A number of players questionable over on the Jaguars side of things, 6 total. That includes Travis Etienne and also Cam Robinson, whom Doug Peterson said has advanced out of the concussion protocol, but was still estimated as limited on Friday, and they have him as questionable as well. From the Green Bay Packers perspective, Mike, we saw how well they actually still played last week, despite losing Quay Walker. A huge piece of that defense, though, certainly want to have him back out there. And Devontae Wyatt, who, even though he's missed the last 3 weeks, still leads the team with 3 sacks. If those 2 Georgia Bulldogs are available here for the Green Bay Packers, obviously would be a big plus for them going into this game against the Jaguars.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a good sign regardless that after leaving the game last week due to the concussion evaluation, that Quay Walker was back on the practice field this week. Only limited, as you said, but was back out there the last couple of days. With Devontae Wyatt, the great thing about this is that as much as the Packers want to get him back, they don't need to say, okay, Devontae, you're going to go play 50 snaps, right? I mean, we've been writing about it. You've been writing about it. There's been a lot of talk about it, the rotation of the guys up front and all these different defensive linemen that have been rotated in and used at different times. You know, maybe Devontae Wyatt isn't 100%, but if he can play 12 to 15 snaps and maybe help things out, great, and get him back out there and then start working into a bigger role later on. So all those things I think are positive signs for the defense.
I want to mention too, because I have this opportunity to be on the Packers social media platforms. So this game is a noon Fox Central start time. Kenny Albert and Jonathan Vilma are calling the game. Megan O'Leary is the sideline reporter. And I've been walking around to anyone that will listen to me in the Green Bay Packers talking about how cool Megan O'Leary is for being willing to really entertain a huge UFC fan over here. I've told people over and over again, like, we talk to players, we see people all the time. It doesn't affect me. I was about as starstruck as I think I've been maybe since I was a kid seeing Megan O'Leary for the first time. So the fact that she's a sideline reporter for this too, just incredible. I just had to throw that out there. Absolutely. It would be like if Billy Joel was walking through Lambeau Field for you. That's what this is like for me as a huge UFC fan, which, by the way, I'll probably be watching on the plane ride down to Jacksonville as UFC 308 is tomorrow.
So you and I won't be talking to each other on the flight then because you'll be watching.
Probably not, unless you have some thoughts on whether or not Max Holloway can beat Ilia Topuria for the featherweight title. Okay, all right. Do you want to get some questions here?
Sure, why
All
not?
right, let's start with it. Let's actually do our jobs here for a minute. We'll start on YouTube here. This is from Rodrigo. Is Tank Bigsby a concern on this run-stop defense? Okay, here's the thing. Tank Bigsby last week was an absolute, for lack of a better term, tank. When you look at what he did to that matchup, I think it ended up being 27 carries, 119 yards, had nothing longer than 14 yards and scored 2 touchdowns. That being said, he's still averaging over 6 yards a carry this year. I asked Matt LaFleur about this in our Friday afternoon news conference, and he said, I mean, you take notice when you see a guy with that type of stats, and it really does feel like this Jacksonville, we'll see what happens with Travis Etienne, he's questionable. But if they have to ride Tank again, he showed last week that he can handle the workload. Yeah, it really is interesting how he had that 100-yard game last week, and it really was kind of a grinded-out, type of performance. And obviously the Jaguars were playing with a lead in the second half, and and running clock and doing all those things that you do when you're up by multiple touchdowns. But as you said, I mean, for the season, he's averaging 6.2 yards per carry, so it was even higher than that before his game last week. So this is definitely a guy you have to be concerned about. When I look at the Packers' run defense, it was really hard to get a handle on exactly what was going on last week against Joe Mixon. Now he's a big-time running back.
And, he gave the Packers some problems in getting 115 yards rushing. But at the same time, if you break it down carry by carry, Mixon had 25 carries in that game. It was either 12 or 13 of them, basically half of his carries. The Packers held him to 2 yards or less half the time.
Yep.
But then when they didn't hold him to 2 yards or less, it was a 10-yard run or a 12-yard run. And so that's where he ended up, breaking that 100-yard barrier when it was all said and done. So kind of been a little bit of feast or famine in some ways with regard to the Packers' run defense.
I like this question from Jacob on YouTube. When playing non-division, non-conference games, why are these considered must-win games, and how detrimental can they be to our playoff chances? Before I turn that question over to you, Mike, I just want to mention, I always look at the AFC matchups, especially these cross-conference division matchups, as almost like your non-conference college football games. Now, certainly there's been some changes in how the bowl season is aligned now, but it was always like this is how you sometimes would pad out the record. It would be how you mount yourself to having make, obviously, if you're really talented, pushing for a, college football playoff or those, but you need to have those wins to sort of pad out the resume. That's what this is. And you look at it from the Vikings perspective or the Lions perspective, you want to see the Packers or really any NFC team lose these games because it's no detriment to anything else with the playoff scenarios. It only benefits you. For the Green Bay Packers playing in a very difficult NFC North this year, which looks like it'll go down to the wire no matter which way you slice it, being able to pick off these wins against the AFC, yeah, you have to take care of business in the NFC North in order to win that division.
Yeah.
But in terms of playoff seedings, you have to get these games to really set yourself up.
I mean, this is the way I look at it. So the Packers are playing all the teams in the AFC South this year. This is game number 4 of the 4. Everybody else in the NFC North is also playing all of these teams in the AFC South over the course of the season. These 4 games are on the Vikings schedule, the Lions schedule, the Bears schedule, and the Packers schedule. Packers have a chance here to go 4-0 in this group of games. If you can do that and get to 4-0, then any one of these AFC South teams that beats one of your division rivals, that's a leg up that you have when you look at the big picture, and when it's all said and done, you're comparing the records. A lot of people look at it as, oh, well, it's a team in the AFC and it's not going to come into play for tiebreakers and stuff. And it may not, because it's not a conference opponent. But these are the same teams that your division rivals are playing. So if you can beat them and then sit back and maybe see if they knock off one of your rivals along the way, that's something that's going to benefit you down the road.
It's a great point, and certainly, again, win's a win's a win. And how many times have we heard? You look at it last season. The end of the year, the Packers are at 9-8. There were a lot of contingencies that had to happen there. But you know what the biggest one was? The fact that they were at 9 wins. Sometimes you just got to win the games and see how the chips fall later on.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, let's go. This one was off X quick. Just hit me really fast. Actually, no. I'm gonna take this one. I like this one from YouTube.
All right.
This is from MM1012. Hi, Mike and Wes. Is Rob Saleh more valuable than any trade we could have this season? Here's the thing, and Robert Saleh is going to get a lot of. This is going to become a story for a couple weeks here, I'm sure, because him and Matt LaFleur go back so far, so long, and obviously their friendship. As Matt was even said in his press conference today, talking to him is just like talking to his brother.
Yeah.
Whether he's on staff or not, there's a lot of communication going on there. But I will say this. The way he's being utilized, just like they used Aubrey Pleasant as an offensive consultant 2 years ago after he was let go from Detroit, it always helps to be able to have more, not necessarily cooks in the kitchen, but people kind of looking at what they're seeing and giving their perspective on it. And Saleh is the type of guy that he can look at the Packers offense and tell them, this is how I would attack you guys. This is what I'm seeing on film. This is what I'm trying to, what you're doing well, this is what I want to take away. I think it really does help to have a perspective like that. It's why you've seen so many times there have been people out there. I think about Mike Pettin as being a defensive, or I think he was maybe an offensive consultant with the Seattle Seahawks in between his time with the Packers as DC and the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Guys that aren't maybe beholden to coming up with game plans or coaching positions or just watching football and giving their analysis, I think there's a true value in it, in addition to the fact that Robert Saleh is one of the brightest defensive coaching minds that this league has seen over the last 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all about trying to see things from different angles, right? And when you have a guy who's been a defensive coordinator and a head coach in this league, but obviously Robert Saleh has made his name in this league as a very successful defensive coordinator, to have a guy like that to look at your offense from his angle.
Yes.
It's the kind of thing, I mean, yes, the Packers have a whole bunch of defensive coaches, right? But they don't have time during the week to do that. They are studying the offense that they are about to play. They are working on the Packers game plan defensively for how they are going to handle that offense that they are about to face. They don't have the time to provide that perspective and that angle on Green Bay's own offense. Having somebody from the outside who can give that to you can certainly pay some dividends.
And to some extent, I think that's even kind of what Tim Lester was doing last year too, where he was an assistant on staff in a very bright offensive mind, now the offensive coordinator of the Iowa Hawkeyes, but he was used, I think, more for analysis with the defensive side of the ball last year. Again, it's just good to sometimes get that type of reset as opposed to just having that 1 week during the bye week to sometimes do that type of film review. Okay, Mr. Wisdom on YouTube, is Andre Sisco a key guy the Packers need to watch? Andre Sisco is the one guy with an interception this year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He has, I think, now 8 in his career, been very successful for them. So, yeah, I think that is going to be a big piece of it. But it does go back to the takeaways, Mike. And you and I have talked about this time and time again this week. 3 takeaways so far for the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Packers have matched that in several games this year. Protecting the football and not allowing those type of things to happen is going to be key. I think there's a lot of really talented people in Jacksonville's secondary, but the fact is they still are 29th right now in passing defense. Green Bay has to take advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that is changing for Jacksonville, it sounds like they are getting Tyson Campbell, the cornerback, back. He has been out for a good portion of this season, and that has certainly had an impact on their defensive statistics, their rankings, and probably the fact that they only have 3 takeaways on defense all season. So getting a guy like that, you know, an anchor in the secondary is going to be a big help to Jacksonville. But yes, the numbers are what they are. 3 takeaways for a defense in 7 games, that's not good enough for Jacksonville. They know that, and that's something they are looking to change. And the Packers, of course, coming off of turning the ball over 3 times themselves against Houston last week, that's what the Packers want to change and get back to protecting the ball in a better way, which is the way they're used to doing. I mean, three giveaway games around here are not common, right? That's what happened last week. So don't let that start to become a trend. Get back to the way you did things before.
Jeremy on YouTube, what do you guys think separates the Packers from other contending teams, such as the Lions, Commanders, Vikings, and Chiefs?
What separates the Packers? I mean, all those teams that you're talking about, they've got a quarterback, obviously, who's leading the charge and been there and done that, and all those teams are doing some really, really good things on defense. In some ways, it's too early to say what exactly is going to separate these teams because, we're not even to the halfway point of the season yet, and in the Packers' case, only played 1 division game. There are 5 division games left to go here in the regular season. So there's still a lot to be sorted out. But all those teams that were listed, they're in the hunt for this thing. And as we get to like Thanksgiving, late November into December, early January, it's going to be a lot of jockeying for position to try to see who falls where and who can set themselves up for a potential run.
I think one thing that separates them, it maybe doesn't separate them as much from Detroit because Detroit has kind of been a sort of a trust the process kind of rebuild that they've had over the last 3 to 4 years. But I think one thing that separates the Packers is this is a young football team that learned to win together late last season, and they're trying to parlay what was an incredible run late last season into consistent victories, into consistent winning, into becoming, I think, the team everybody believes they can become with the transition they've made this year with Jeff Hafley and that defense, the fact that Jordan Love, for as much has been made this week about the interceptions, the fact that he's at 15 touchdowns already and he missed 2 games.
Right.
I mean, the plays that he's been making, the points that he's been scoring, no matter what way you slice it, Michael, the number one thing that an NFL quarterback has to do, other than always protecting the football, is get the ball in the end zone. Jordan Love has shown he can do that. Nobody in the National Football League has thrown more touchdown passes since week 1 of the 2023 season than Jordan Love. And he's doing it with a bunch of players outside of Josh Jacobs that have been along with him down that entire stretch.
Yeah.
That's what really excites me about this team. I think that's what separates them because in a lot of ways, it's the same blueprint that Green Bay followed after the transition to Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
They're on that track right now.
You and I obviously are closer to this team than in terms of analyzing it than we are to anything else. One thing I would say that I feel about this Packers team, really on both sides of the ball, but speaking specifically right now about the offense, is we don't know how good these guys can be.
Right.
And the case in point is last week, and I mentioned this in Insider Inbox actually this morning's column. Last week the Packers scored 24 points against a 5-1 Houston Texans team. That's not bad, right?
Not bad.
That's not bad offensive production. But they went 3 and out 5 times and had 2 interceptions.
Right.
They had 7 possessions in that game that were completely fruitless, that they got nothing out of them. 7 fruitless possessions, and you still had 24 points on the board against a team that came into your building with only 1 loss on the year. That just shows you maybe where this team can go. Now, there's no guarantee that they can get there, but there's still a lot out there for them, and I think that's what Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love and everybody is trying to get to here as the season progresses.
A couple more minutes. He's Mike Spofford. I'm Wes Hockwitz. Packers preview presented by Microsoft Surface. Again, taking your questions on X, YouTube, and Facebook. This one made me laugh. This was off YouTube. With the alias, I assume this is not the person's name. Too old for this. Believe that Wes Hod and Wes Anderson are the same person. I've never seen them in the same room. Other than the fact that both of our first names are Wes, and the fact that I very much enjoy his movies, I don't think there are any parallels whatsoever between myself and Wes Anderson. We don't even remotely look the same. He has much better hair than I do. But regardless, I appreciate the sentiment. Michael Hausman, who may or may not have actually worked at the Green Bay Packers before, on YouTube. Hi, Mike and Wes. Will you guys be covering the game from the press box or from the pool on Sunday? Are you bringing your trunks along with you? It might be more comfortable.
yeah, it might be, but no, I think we'll be in the press box. I'm just counting on that press box to be air conditioned, right?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
So, yeah.
If it's not, we might be in a lot of problems there. Isaiah on YouTube, I see a lot of talk about trading for a pass rusher. Is that really a need for RD? It's not.
No, I agree. It's not. The Packers have, I mean, what is it? 12 different guys have at least 1 sack.
Half a sack. Yes.
At least
11 with 1 sack.
11 with 1 sack. 12 guys with at least half a sack. The Packers are playing the long game here. It's about the rotations. It's about keeping guys fresh. It's the fact that there are 7 games down. There are 10 more in the regular season to go, and if all goes well, more than that later on in January, right? So, no, the Packers don't have a guy you're like, oh, that guy's got 6 sacks and he's got 8 sacks. I mean, no, the Packers don't have that guy. But you know what? They don't care because they're getting the production that they need in the collective sense of things, and nobody's getting worn out because even a guy, as you wrote in your story this week, even a guy like Kenny Clark, who is always really hard to take off the field and has carried a huge workload during his course of time in Green Bay, especially the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years. He's even had his workload cut back a little bit, and he's liking it because he's feeling fresher in the fourth quarter, and that's there's a lot to be said for that.
This has nothing to do with anything, but it was something I was not able to work into any stories this week. Kenny's first game as a pro was in Jacksonville in 16.
That's
when we were
right.
there.
Yeah.
He only played a handful of snaps, but he was recounting how hot it was down there for that game.
It was
and
hot.
he mentioned how he saw his mom afterwards, and she was just completely drenched just because of how hot it was that day. And obviously some special memories for him with that being his first NFL game, and certainly excited to be going back. But to bring it back to that point, that was one of the things that I thought Press Taylor, the offensive coordinator for the Jaguars, was very, very effusive in his praise of the Packers and what they've done defensively. Listen, Mike, they want to have a 10-sack rusher. They want all these guys to get these type of opportunities. But when you see a game like last week where there were 4 sacks that you kind of, synthesized a little bit, you drew some stuff up that worked, but 11 tackles for a loss, 8 quarterback hits, whatever it was, that's the type of production you're looking for. You hope at the end of the year it works out and all your guys get their numbers and they get what they want. But the Packers defense right now, when you're asking a question about whether or not to trade for anybody, I'd say this unit, especially that defensive front, is playing as well as it has all season.
Well, and the thing is too, when you look at exactly how the Packers are getting those sacks, the exception being when Rashawn Gary gets the sack because the right tackle trips over the foot of the tight end and whatever, which is just kind of a solo thing that happens. The rest of these sacks are teammates helping each other out and clearing lanes and creating opportunities. Eric Wilson's 2 sacks last week, he had a tremendous game. The 2 sacks, 2 other tackles in the backfield. But both of his sacks One of them, Kenny Clark, was the guy he was working with who cleared things up
Yep.
for him. And the other one, Edgerrin Cooper, was the guy doing it. So, yeah, there's one guy who's getting the stat of the sack, but these guys know because they're looking at the film every day. That, you know, this is how they're game planning things. It is a teamwork thing up front, and it, you know, they're having a lot of fun doing it.
We got to go. Our cameraman over there, Tyler Gajewski, and his wonderful mother, Rosemary, I think.
He's got some perch to
He's
go
got to go
get.
fill up on some perch
Yeah.
at one of the local supper clubs, so we'll let him get moving here. I'm gonna take Jamie Hamilton's question off YouTube, and I'm also gonna spin it into the key to victory here.
Okay.
Jamie asks, who is a player that could make an impact on this game? Go Pack Go. There you go, Jamie. I'll open that up to you, and if you want to pivot that also into what it's going to take to win this game, by all means.
I mean, there are a lot of guys here, but I think the guy to a guy to potentially keep an eye on, because of what we heard Adam Stenovich say yesterday at the podium, guy to keep an eye on could be Christian Watson. He's a game-breaking type of guy. He's a dangerous weapon out there on the field, and he's healthy. And the Packers haven't necessarily gotten him the ball as much as they would like to.
And he's a Florida guy.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
It's not Tampa, but it's
no,
pretty
it's not
close.
Tampa where he grew up. But so I think if I were the Jaguars, I would not be looking at Christian Watson's statistics. I would be concerned about that guy.
I'm with you 115% on that as well. Matt B on Facebook, what's in the Cup West? Wouldn't you like to know, Matt B? Wouldn't you like to know? Doris Pringle also said, does Mike like hugs? That's what you get for working with me for 8.5 years. He's Mike Spofford. I'm Wes Hodkiewicz. We thank you as always for joining us on Packers Preview. Like always, tons of content on the Packers.com and Packers mobile app. By the way, earlier today, Michael, you know what they said? Not to look ahead. You never look ahead to opponents, but it was announced earlier today. Next week, Lambeau Field, Detroit Lions, the 50s unis are back.
50s classics are back.
Are we
yeah.
dressing up like 50s reporters?
Maybe we should.
We actually
We got to
should.
look into that.
See if I can get a suit on short notice that could set me up with that.
And it is like Halloween and everything next week, right? So
I
yeah.
would do it. But yeah, tons of content up on Packers.com. I wrote a lot on the defensive front this week. Mike had to edit all of it. So check out like those 15 stories I did. Mike also, a couple things that you were touching on this week, including Robert Saleh being back. Your One Last Look column will also be up on Packers.com tomorrow. Is there anything else you want to pub before we leave?
I mean, it's all out there. The midweek chat, your stories, my stories.
Videos. We did about 15 different videos.
Yeah, we got unscripted. Final Thoughts video will be up.
Packers preview is currently happening.
Packers preview happening now. So yeah, all kinds of stuff.
He's Mike. I'm Wes. Until next time, enjoy the game, everybody.